But Mark Devlin is here tonight, ladies and gentlemen, and I am so grateful and so humbled for Mark to take the stage. Please.
Well, thanks very much, Sarah. Evening, everyone. 32 years of DJing, and it's the first time I've shared a bill with Danny Rampling. I got there in the end. But hopefully a few more. So I have been a club and radio DJ for many years, and for so much of that time, it's all I ever wanted to do. And I was desperate for so many years to get on to BBC Radio 1. And I never did, and it was my greatest blessing. Right, Danny? So grateful that never happened. So I'm doing some very different things with my life now to what I'd ever planned. This never was part of the plan. But I feel as if I've stumbled upon my rightful life path. And if you'd told me 15 years ago that I'd be doing this and that I would be addressing events such as this, I'd have told you you were crazy. But I've spent the past several years since I first underwent an awakening experience around about 2008, looking into the true nature of what this world really is, who really controls things, the networks and the groups through which they get it done, these secret society networks and these occult mystery schools and all this kind of thing. And so I've built up quite a comprehension of the way in which the world is so different to how we've been told our entire lives it is. And my specialist area of interest was how this plays into the corporate music industry and how that's used to further certain agendas and to sow societal conditioning and mind control and things of this nature. And I thought I had a pretty good grasp on things through having done many years of this type of research. So along comes early 2020, and two things absolutely dumbfounded me, even in spite of having done all that research. The first thing was the apparent ease with which the controllers of organised society had been able to coerce the vast bulk of humanity into undertaking behaviours which went against their own self-interests and those of their own families on the basis of clear and provable lies. So when it came to Convid, which is what I call it, I knew from day one it was a massive scam. And it doesn't mean there's anything special about me in me saying that. It's merely as a result of having done the research. By that point, I'd studied many so-called false flag terror events, and I'd got used to the various tactics and methods that were always used in these kind of events. And I saw so many of the calling cards and so many of the clues and indicators with Convid to show that it had been cooked up by the very same forces that cook all these other events up. We're basically talking aspects of military intelligence. We're talking MI5, MI6, and the organisations through which they operate, the Tavistock Institute, the BBC, which is a state propaganda arm of British military so-called intelligence. That's a bit of an oxymoron, really, isn't it? Military intelligence. But anyway, so that's who cooked this whole thing up. And it was very frustrating knowing myself for sure that this whole thing was a massive scam, but seeing so many other people falling for it. So that surprised me, the ease with which they were able to pull this thing off. So if you'd told me 3 years ago that people would be adopting the kind of behaviours that they have over the past 2.5 years, I wouldn't have believed you. It's been like living through a real-life Monty Python sketch. Only if it had been presented as a Monty Python sketch, people would have said, oh, they've taken it a bit too far this time. They don't know when to stop. So that was one thing. And then the other thing, which really surprised me, was the sheer lack of outspokenness among so-called celebrities, famous people, and specifically those in the music industry. It's been disgusting. It's unbelievable. I mean, I'd researched a lot up to that point about the way in which the music industry is run and controlled. And I knew that artists are kept on a very tight leash. I knew that they're assets of the system. Many of them are what I refer to as lifetime actors. They're born into these roles and they're given these careers. And they come at a price. They're expected to fulfill certain agendas and further certain narratives. But even in spite of having done that research, I've been absolutely dismayed, disappointed, and outraged by the lack of famous people from the music industry speaking out. We're trained to think of musicians and creative types as being a bit anti-establishment, being a bit edgy, a bit dangerous, not towing the official line, liking to go against official narratives. But that's not what we've seen over the past 2.5 years, is it? Quite the opposite. They've shown their true colours. They've let it be known for all to see that they're completely and utterly controlled and dancing to the piper's tune, serving the hand that feeds them. So some questions that I've had is, where have all these so-called punk rockers been? Where have all the so-called anarchists been? What about the heavy metal guys, heavy rock? Isn't that supposed to stick it to the man, to the establishment, to the system? Not only that, where have all the bloody DJs been? Right? With a few honourable exceptions, obviously, but not many. I come from the DJ game, and again, we're, as a breed, thought of supposedly as being a bit anti-establishment and not going along with mainstream society. But in all honesty, there should have been hundreds of names from the DJ world who should have stepped up these past 2.5 years and said some things that needed saying. DJs have huge audiences and have incredible sway and incredible influence. And just the rightly judged word or two from just a couple of extremely influential names could have made all the difference in this narrative with certain demographics, certain groups in society. And the fact that virtually none of them have stood up is a further indicator of just how owned their asses are. So, I did an interview a few years ago with a rapper who goes by the name of M1. Nothing to do with motorways, he's the frontman of a hip-hop group called Dead Prez. Anyone heard of Dead Prez? Okay, a few, yeah. So, he said to me, if, as an artist, you're not saying things that are meaningful and expressing yourself openly and saying what's on your mind and making statements, I have to ask, in all honesty, are you an artist? Because that's what artistry is supposed to be all about. Creative expression. That can come through DJs, it can come through musicians, it can come through actors. Same with theatre. It's the same with all these industries, isn't it? Yeah. That's right. That's right. And so it becomes clear that it takes a certain amount of integrity and courage and a conscience to stand up and speak out at times like these, because there's never been a time in human history where every voice from the creative, artistic professions has been needed more than this one. In the whole field of human history, every voice has been needed, but the response has been pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. Only a few exceptions. You know, obvious names like Van Morrison, who's a Sir, which makes it all the more surprising. Because Sirs aren't generally known for going against the establishment narrative. Right, Sir Paul? Right, Sir Mick? Right, Sir Elton? They're more likely to go on ads for the NHS, rolling up their sleeves and saying, come on, guys, take the jab, you know. Right, Sir Elton? And Sir Michael Caine on the same ad. Disgusting. Lifetime actors. Like Lenny Henry, oh boy. Disgusting. So, you know, Van Morrison, Ian Brown said a thing or two, right? Right said Fred. So, you know, nothing from Paul Weller and Billy Bragg, but plenty from Right Said Fred. Something's gone wrong here. A word or two from Morrissey. He said a couple of things, you know, not as much as he should have done, but better than nothing. You take what you can get. You know, a few others from the dance music scene. Baby D, Norris the Boss Windross, I think, has said a couple of things. Gary Cobain, Future Sound of London. But not many others, not many others. So I've had to come round to accepting that I was actually quite naive in imagining that with an agenda like this coming along, there would be hundreds of voices from the entertainment world, from the music business, standing up to speak out about the obvious tyranny. Because ignorance is not an excuse, because all the information anyone could ever need is out there, is readily available through the internet. Personal research is available to anyone with the will to do it. You know, Danny's got up to speed with what's going on. If he can do it, anyone else can. So there is no excuse. No, that wasn't a... That wasn't a diss. Let me rephrase it. If Danny can research this, Carl Cox can as well. All right? But Carl's making ads saying, if you want the dance and festival scene to get back to normal, go out there and take your vaccine, folks. So, you know, that says rather a lot in my book. And it just amazes me that there aren't more people being outspoken like this, because what's at stake here is our very futures and the futures of our own families. The stripping away of rights and freedoms which are natural born. We are sovereign beings, you know. Rights and freedoms don't come from governments or any other men or women or man-made institutions. They come from the Most High, from the Creator, the creative force. Nobody can take that away from you. But there's an attempt to, and we can know that it's taking place. So if people aren't going to step up in these kind of circumstances, when the hell would they ever? And people say to me often, you know, it's great what you're doing. Thanks so much for what you're doing, Mark. And it's very gratifying to hear that. But for me, there's nothing special about what I am doing, because I feel that everyone should be doing this. Every voice is needed. And what's happening here is history is being made by the day. The books that are being written in these times, the documentary films, such as Naeem's, that are being made in these times, all the videos that are being made, the podcasts that are being done, the freedom rallies that are taking place, are going to go down in history, and future generations are going to look back on what we're all doing in these times, and that will be their gauge as to what life was like in 2022 and where human consciousness was at in 2022. So everyone's role in this is going to be remembered. It's going to be observed and noted by those whose full-time jobs it is to observe and note these things. But it's also going to be noted and observed by a higher power. And so you want to be on the right side of history. We all do. This goes for everyone. There's an event taking place next weekend, the Freedom Music Festival, down in Battle. You may have heard about it. It's going to be a great event happening all weekend, Friday through Sunday, live music, Right Said Fred in the house, Danny Rampling in the house, DJs, live acts. It's going to be a great event. But there was an attempt at a hit piece that was done on it by a website known as Vice News. Anyone heard of him? Yeah. Tim Hume, exactly. So this guy phoned me up. He caught me unawares, called me on my mobile one day and said, I'd like to speak to you about the upcoming festival. And I just assumed he was, on our side, one of us. And he said, can I ask you a few questions about it? I had nothing to hide, so I spoke about my participation in it. He was asking me about the aims and the goals of those running the event. And I said, well, you're better off speaking to them about it, but I can speak to you about my part in it. Then I saw the piece that he'd written a couple of weeks later. And it was an obvious attempt at a smear campaign and a hit piece, And it was intended to frame all of us as crazy tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy whack jobs, anti-vaxxers, COVID deniers, all these other phrases that are invented by the social scientists and the anthropologists at Tavistock and Behavioural Insights team and all these other agencies. But I really feel that piece would have backfired on him, because it seems quite a lot of people are now aware of that event that wouldn't have been if old Tim hadn't put it on his website. And so I emailed him back and I said to him pretty much what I'm saying here, that there are only two sides in this and only one side is going to win. Evil and darkness has had this world to itself for far too long. It's about time goodness and light and truth and freedom reclaim the game for itself. That process is underway. The psychopaths, the Satanists, the controllers of this narrative have overreached spectacularly with this one. They've made it so obvious what their game plan is, what they're all about. They even feel duty-bound to say so, which is what my T-shirt's all about. It speaks to this dynamic of gaining our tacit approval for their fuckeries. So they feel that by putting the emphasis and the onus on us, they can somehow escape the karmic consequence that would otherwise be theirs, because they've got us to tacitly agree to it. To not say no is as good as saying yes. So they try and cheat their way out of karma by finding these little loopholes. They think, imagine the audacity. They think you can cheat your way out of a dynamic set into place by the creator of all things, by sneaking your way round it and going round the back door, But that's how mentally ill and diseased these individuals are. And it's going to be their downfall. I'm not saying we're not going to have some rough times ahead. I'm not saying we don't have the battle of our lives on our hands. Clearly we do. And we don't know how long that's going to last and what it's going to look like. But ultimately, I feel that they've dug their own grave, because the past 2.5 years has woken so many people up who might otherwise still be wandering around in the fog of a mind-controlled trance, believing all the propaganda, believing all the lies. We have so many more on our side now. And they would have factored this in. They would have considered this collateral damage, and the psychologists, the anthropologists would have tried to work out how to manipulate that. And they might have got old Professor Neil Ferguson with his little computer models, to get his AI algorithms and predictive models to try and work out the way things are going to go. But there's one thing that computer modelling and AI can't fathom, which is the tenacity of the human spirit when faced with extreme challenges. This is something I've seen come through in all the amazing music that has been made these past 2.5, 3 years. Because although the mainstream has gone down the shitter irretrievably, what I've found, and those that populate it, what I've found is that in alternative realms, if you know where to look, there are some incredible independent music makers who are completely unplugged from the industry machine and they're making the music of their lives. And this is in all genres. There's some amazing conscious hip-hop. There's some amazing conscious reggae. There's dance music. There's electronic music. There's acoustic, rock, all styles of music. Artists, when faced with hard times and struggles, seem to produce their very best work. It's always been that way. And that's the human spirit shining through. That's our innate humanity shining through. That's the human conscience shining through. You can never predict which way that's going to go. So it's going to be their downfall. Their hubris, their audacity, their overreach is going to be their downfall. And ultimately, it's not going to go their way. So this is what I told Tim Hume from Vice News when I emailed him back. I said, there's only two sides in this, and any time you want to come over to our side, and that applies to any of our friends and family and colleagues that we might have been arguing with these past 2.5, 3 years, you know, I'm sure you would join me in welcoming any of them with open arms any time they want to come over to our side, because whatever challenges lie ahead, ultimately, we will win. Thank you. Thanks to Sarah for a great initiative. Unified Artists for Freedom, that's what it's all about. Thank you.